Hey, welcome back to Start With a Win. This is a two-part episode, and this is part two of that two-part episode. So if you haven't listened to part one, make sure you go back and listen or watch part one on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast, and come back here and listen or watch part two. I hope you enjoy.
People love stories of other people, their challenges. So I think that story was fantastic.
Well, one thing too, I mean, you interact with a lot of leaders and a lot of people who are high performers. And I guess, one thing I'd be curious to understand or know is, what is some of the biggest hurdles that those people have to deal with? And what is the advice and the encouragement that you give to those people in order to kind of achieve their best?
Yeah, Mark, that almost everyone I speak to, it comes down to the same thing that I shared on the show, because that was like the core piece of it. So it's just a different way of asking people why they're doing things, what's driving them to do it, what do they really love to do.
Well, it seems like to me, it's interesting because I feel like we're always pulled, right? It's like, okay, I love to do this thing, but I also need to make money. And I love to, maybe have a hobby. I have some sort of thing that I'm interested in, but then it doesn't maybe necessarily meet with what I need to do in order to, produce for my family and survive. So, and then there's always that risk and that fear of like, okay, if I really do what I love, can I be successful at it? And so, I guess that's just, it's the constant struggle that we all have.
Well, some people are lucky enough to find a job that they do love, and you still get all those issues happening, because not exactly the same, but you still get the struggle because we're human.
Yeah.
And it's part of the human journey. And, by the time you get to the place where you're, fully, totally at peace all the time, you're either the Dalai Lama, Mother Teresa, or someone like that, and then you die. So I guess it's part of getting a different perspective and looking at things differently to appreciate what you actually have. So, I guess I could say that, but these are not new things.
No, this is all, I think all that's really great.
I have a question also about this. So, Amanda, and I'm sure you've heard the recent studies about upwards of half of workers in 2023, in the first half of 2023, are considering moving jobs. And a lot of that has to do with, obviously people want to be happy where they work. They want to work for somebody who cares about their success. What's your perspective on that statistic, and what can an employer do in order to reduce that churn based upon, what's going on here, which is that fear, doubt, and overwhelm that reduces our liking of our business place?
You were CEO of Remax, so you get this, because Remax, to me anyway, has always had a good culture from the times I've been with it. And you said it in this question. It's how much you show people that you care.
Okay.
Because I wish I could quote the original person. I don't know who it was. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Right.
So we go and we have all these fancy people talking about big fancy things, and there's B to B and B to C and B to something else. And I usually say, what about H to H? and it's like, and they go, huh? And it's like human to human.
There you go.
Like, here we are. We're all humans. And I don't care who you are, where you are, who you're dealing with, whether you're an entrepreneur trying to sell your products, build a business, do something. Remember, you're dealing with humans, and it's heart to heart. And you can get as fancy-wancy as you want, but at the very base level, if you have a core recipe and you screw up the core recipe, then whatever dish you make doesn't taste good.
Right.
At the core, we've got heart to heart, human to human. And, if you believe your boss believes in you, if your boss demonstrates that he or she believes in you, if you're the boss, Believe in your people. And if you don't believe in them, we'll move them on to a job where they'll be happier. And belief in your team and belief in their ability to do it, and then upskilling them so they succeed, not setting them up to fail, because that's not caring, and educating them along the way will keep people with you when you pay them less than they could get somewhere else. And these days, not only as part of that statistic you mentioned, Adam, but everybody is complaining about we can't find staff.
Right.
We can't find enough people. Well, it's absolutely critical that places become a workplace that's joyful, that people want to work at, where the employees go off and tell others, you should work with us. It's such a great place to work. And that's a place where, a fish rots from the head, doesn't it? I'm not actually sure if a fish does rot from the head. I don't know, but it's a saying. And, when you've got leadership, the responsibility of the leadership is to create the environment in which people can be the best they can be.
That's awesome. So to that note, and I love the direction we're going here. We're talking about leadership, creating, you mentioned an environment where,
people can be the best they can be.
They can be the best they can be. At Remax, we always said we create an environment where people can be as successful as they want to be. Same thing.
Yes.
So we always stressed that the leadership should be visible and present. And obviously, walking the hallways is one way of doing it. Visible and present is not sending an email out saying, today we want you to do this. We either need physical presence or presence on video. I've been coaching a lot of CEOs to do podcasts and videos like this so that the culture of the organization can be projected, constantly reminding the employees as well as the customers, because the customers want to know that they're doing business with a culture that's great. So I know you're a big fan of this. Give me a little bit of feedback on, is this happening enough?
Oh, no. No.
That was, yeah.
Pretty much no.
What can we do as leaders?
I feel like just grabbing people by their clothes and shaking them and going, slap, 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 wake up, wake up. It's not that hard
right.
to care for people, like genuinely. I always say a leader's job is threefold. And the first is to create an environment in which people can be the best they can be.
Right.
The second is to help people believe in themselves, because belief in your own ability is a better predictor of success than any level of skill. And the third is to change people's behavior. And people go, oh, well, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. They would never change their spots. Yes, they do. People change in a heartbeat if you tell them a story that touches their hearts. So when you get success stories at work, when somebody does a great job, acknowledge them, share the stories. And remember, if you're in a leadership role, that, and this I learned by having to go virtual during COVID. If I consciously connect with you too in this field, which I did before we got on the call, and I'm just conscious that we're part of the same field, and then I bring in all the potential listeners and all the ones who may be listening, not even if we're not live. If you consciously make that, create that awareness, then we connect in a much better way than we would if we didn't consciously do that.
Yes.
It's possible. The metaphor here is you think of somebody you haven't thought of for 6 months, and you go, geez, I haven't heard from Fred. And then all of a sudden, Fred rings you that afternoon, calls you, in America, I think you say, or sends you a message. And you go, wow, there's Fred. Well, guess why? Because Fred in the field picked up, you thought about him, and Fred responded to that.
So wouldn't it be a shame if Fred was your boss and you haven't heard from him in 6 months?
Oh, yes. That would be a very bad thing.
I see that happening, though.
Seriously?
Yes. I see people, the first thing that customers or the employee level say is, I haven't heard from my boss. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. I mean, that's what all of the surveys are showing. And it's fascinating because it's a lack of presence creates lack of trust and transparency in an organization. Also creates a lack of clarity in the direction the employees need to be going. So it's fascinating that we're talking about this, bringing that joy, bringing that connection of everything from the interpersonal aspect, like you said, H to H, human to human, or heart to heart, I think is even more impactful, because that is the passion that leaders have for the success of their employees.
Yes.
And
that's
so
how
cool.
the employees feel it.
Yes.
They feel it coming from you. Everything in business is about feelings. Everything.
Totally.
Nobody ever talks about it, but everything. People won't buy from you unless they feel good about you. Like, I've just gone through the process of buying a new car here, and I can guarantee there's 2 or 3 people I didn't buy from. I could have, but I didn't, because I didn't like the way I felt around them.
Right.
And that's just from a sales perspective. From a leadership perspective, how people feel about you and your product, your authenticity, and that's the other thing we can touch on with leadership in particular, is the authenticity. And I prided, and I know people love hearing stories, so it's not like a me fest, but it's just an example of how I've lived through this. I prided myself on being an authentic speaker, because when I was very young and began my speaking career, I'd met some famous speakers who were amazing on stage, and they were like depressed hulks off stage. And I'm like, oh, this doesn't feel right.
Right.
So I committed to being like me, really authentic on stage. Well, then I met David Martin like 30 years later, and he pointed out to me how I had been living my life based on the stories of a 2-year-old, which were those stories I mentioned in the podcast, the 3 core fears. And so people need to listen to the podcast, because we haven't got time now to talk about it. But he said, you've been living 60 years of your life based on the story of a 2-year-old. Do you want to keep going? I went, well, no. And as I went through that process, which was extraordinarily challenging but unbelievably valuable, I became more of who I really am. And I realized that I had created a persona, and that persona was on stage. And instead of me bringing Amanda on stage, what I did was take the persona and put it into Amanda's life. And that doesn't lead to joy. Did I know it? Was I conscious of it? Absolutely not. I would never have done it if I was aware of it. But as soon as someone pointed out to me, I went, oh, that's not good. And I worked at changing it. And since I have, and it kind of ties into what I said in the podcast too, since I've come back more into understanding who I really am, and I'm not my story, because we are not our stories. Our stories rule our lives if we let them, but we're not our stories.
Right.
Then that authenticity comes out, and it's as if you get closer to the essence of who you really are, and then that essence emanates out. And if you're in a leadership role or speaking, I remember thinking one day, because my presentations have changed completely, like they look the same from the outside, but the responses they astonish me. I'm grateful, but I don't feel like I'm doing much different, but everything's different.
Wow. Yeah.
And that's what happens, and it's a much deeper and richer experience. So as a leader works through their own garbage, basically, and learns to become more authentic, because we talk a lot about authenticity and transparency, but nobody really tells you how to become authentic.
Yeah.
It's true. That's
So
true.
what is that? So when you found out later in life, 30 years later, what was that work that you were doing every day to remind yourself or try to be present? Like, what was that work that you were doing in order to grow and develop into, who you were made to be?
Well, it was kind of slow down to the speed of consciousness and try to be present in every moment. And by being present in every moment, I mean that you're not thinking about the past and you're not telling yourself a story. You're not thinking about the future. You're actually right here, right now, like we are.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what else is going on. We are here connected heart to heart and in each other's fields. Okay. And it's the same with the people listening. But if you're listening and you're, I don't know, cooking or driving or doing something else at the same time, which everyone does, this is not a criticism.
Yep.
But just know that that's not being 100% present. And I do it all the time too.
Yeah.
Like I'll be cooking, but I'll play a podcast, your podcast, or I'll play another podcast, or I'll listen to music or something. But all of that is not actually being present. So I tried to focus on being really present and silent as much as I could, because it's the silence that I hadn't really ever given myself permission to do. If things would get silent, I'd get very uncomfortable and I'd find 100 things to do, or I'd talk a million miles an hour. But I trained myself to be able to sit on my amazingly beautiful balcony in Australia and look out over the forest and the ocean. And I had all that before, but I never sat there and enjoyed it.
Yeah, so it's really that training that we have. I mean, especially in this day and age, right? I mean, with social media, and we have a computer in our pockets that we can Google search every thought that comes into our brain. We can, start typing in a question, so I could see how this is going to be very difficult for people to really practice. But in the same way, I think it can be very powerful, because if you practice that presence, then all of a sudden you can evolve into the greatest version of yourself.
Yeah, and stillness. So it's the presence, the stillness, and slowing down to the speed of consciousness, as David says. Because with all of those, look, it's only difficult in the beginning, because we're so used to the habit of the busy and filling every second. But practice with little pieces, like 2 minutes. I used to start off with 2 minutes, and I would write little notes to myself everywhere saying, present, stillness, slow down. And then it becomes something that you miss. I miss it now if I don't have it. And in those moments where you're present, you're still and you've slowed down, you get to look deeper inside and catch the stories that you've been telling yourself. So that's one part, Mark. The second part is, as I went through every day, I would pick up. In the beginning, I had to pick up if I wasn't feeling good. First of all, I had to learn to feel. Like, seriously, I had to learn to feel, because I had so effectively severed myself at the neck, because if I had a feeling, it was always going to be way too scary. So truly, at the age of about 63 or 4, I started to learn to really feel. So then once I could feel, I would then notice, and people are probably thinking, wow, she's some kind of weirdo not being able to feel. But I wonder how many people actually are like that.
Right.
Who've had some sort of trauma between 0 to 7 that was so traumatic for them that they just, not going to feel again. Because I know my head said to my heart, no, don't you worry. You just don't feel, and we'll take care of everything. So you just no feeling here, and we'll just take. So I was brilliant at being in my head, but crap at feeling. So I would notice if I wasn't feeling well, and then I would listen to the story I had told myself at the time, and then I could change that story.
Can you tell us, how do you start your day with a win in order to make these choices and pursue an effective day?
For me, Adam and Mark, the real secret is gratitude. And I had already led a life that had a lot of gratitude in it before I met David Martin, but he kind of lasered me into the power of gratitude. So whenever I feel a bit down or challenged, like moving back to America was a really big thing. It's like life part 17. And in the moments where I felt a bit overwhelmed, or maybe I was bordering on burnout, if I consciously stop and I focus on gratitude, all the things for which I'm grateful, and there are many, many of them, and you can always find something for which to be grateful. And if you're having a really, 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 really bad week or day, then be grateful you're breathing. So there's always something for which to be grateful. Be grateful you have eyesight if you have it. And you can see beautiful things around you. So I start my days with a complete setting, if you like, of gratitude, and then I make a conscious choice to find things for which to be grateful.
Amanda Gore, thank you so much for being on Start With a Win. We appreciate all that you do, and thank you for starting with a win.
That's right. Hey, thank you for listening to Start With a Win. If you'd enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. And for more great content, head over to adamcontos.com, where you can get blog posts, you can get access to other great content as courses and the like. So until next time, remember, start with a win.